Okay, so we're still going through multiple choice review. And if you notice, we moved up the timeline a little bit. So if you take a look here, I have um, question number 11 around, 1919. We were talking about like close to the, World War One, and then question 21, which is what we're going to go all the way up to. Not in this video though, but between this video and the next video, we'll get to question 21. That'll take us up to about the, towards the end of the Great Depression, right? So we're going to look at the first couple of questions from going from 11 on. It'll take us about midway through, and in the next video, we'll look at the next couple of questions because the questions that come afterwards are a little bit require a little more time for us to look at. All right, so here we are at question 11 and 12. This is a question concerning women's suffrage. And it's weird because I always get the question on whether or not suffrage means suffering. And it to some people, I guess it might, but suffrage simply means the right to vote. Okay. So whenever you think about suffrage, you have to think about the right to vote. It's usually a term that's used with women's suffrage, right? So in 1848, Seneca Falls, New York, this is when the movement begins for women pushing to have the right to vote in the United States. And it's interesting because out west, women were getting the right to vote earlier, but at a national level, they were not, right? And so women began protesting, and and they're looking, you see, like, well, what's the goal of being able to vote, right? Or having suffrage? It's for equality, political equality, because with political equality, you can get equality in the other areas of your life. If you don't have a political voice, then it's like you don't exist in this country, because we are a democracy, and voting and the power of the government comes from the people, and voting is the way that the people exercise their power. But then, so you look at, you say, well, what's controversial, right? So the definition of controversial is something that's going to cause a strong disagreement. And what happened was, during this time, as women, and again, they were campaigning for the right to vote since 1848, right? This is Susan B. Anthony, Lucretia Mott, um, you you know that are pushing this, and Louisa May Alcott. Um, but what happens is that they don't get the right to vote, and it's going on and on and on. The years are going by, and then you're getting to this time where it's 1917, and here you have women pushing for the right to vote, right? And this is almost like the best time, because as you have men going to war for World War One, right? Because the United States enters World War One late. We enter in 1917 after we're kind of threatened with the Zimmerman telegram. Um, that's people are saying, no, it's not the right time for women to speak up and try to get the right to vote. We need things to kind of stay stable and no change. Look at what we're going through. We're going through this big war, World War One, and now these women are asking for the right to vote. Well, they weren't asking just in 1917. They've been asking and demanding since 1848, right? So when you look at question 12, which statement best represents a reason why the protest was considered, right? Mostly by men, controversial. It's because they're picking it at a time when you have, America entering this war, World War One. And it's really, after the war, or as the war is coming to its conclusion, right? Like immediately after 1920, that's when we finally get the 19th Amendment. And the 19th Amendment is going to be the amendment that says, okay, we recognize women, they have, their political ability, they have the right to vote, and it's enshrined in the Constitution. All right. So just something to be aware of. There's all of this all this stuff going on, playing on in the background. But this question, by the way, this is one of those questions, anything about women's suffrage, it seems to pop up at least every other exam. So make sure suffrage is not suffering. Suffrage is not having the right to vote. And that could be, like for instance, the 15th Amendment was um, when universal male suffrage took place, meaning that all men who were citizens were able to vote. And as you know, that came up because slavery had ended, the Civil War ended, and then you get those three amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, right? The 13th Amendment freed slaves, enslaved people. The 14th Amendment more or less defined citizenship. And then the 15th Amendment stated that, all men had the right to vote. Um, Here you have this poem, right? I too, right? This is a famous Harlem Renaissance poem by Langston Hughes. And for those you don't know, Langston Hughes is an African American poet, writer, famous literary figure, right? And so he writes this beautiful poem, and you know, you get places. If you look at the map over here, you get places where there's huge African American communities that are established because of this thing called the Great Migration. I mean, think about it. Slavery is coming to an end, and you have an era of black codes and an era of segregation and Jim Crow laws, and people want to get away, right? Especially African Americans who were formerly enslaved. They want to get away from these places because they see that their chances for a good life are diminished, and they begin moving north. And hence this term, the Great Migration, because you have people moving away from your traditional southern states or your former Confederate states to northern states. And when they show up, they create centers um, of culture and learning. Harlem is going to be one of these places, right? So you have what's called the Harlem Renaissance, which is going to take place right here in New York City, right in northern Manhattan. And um, and and the thing is that it's kind of weird because it's a place where you know you had people of all levels of talents, of socioeconomic status living in one area. Some of it will be of choice, and but a lot of it will be, people are forced into these areas, due to like redlining and government intervention to kind of like pigeonhole people into areas that they feel. Any case, so even with all of that, this is what makes it truly amazing. Even with all of that, with people getting pushed into these neighborhoods and being forced to live there, you have amazing accomplishments. You have a renaissance of learning. And whenever you hear the term renaissance, I mean, just think like it's like the new thing going on, like great learning, great activities, like you know, a high point of culture. So this is what's going on. Anytime you hear, whether it be Renaissance, right? Or Harlem Renaissance, right? It's a rebirth of learning. That's what the word Renaissance literally means, right? Rebirth of learning. So, uh, you know, here, what concept is best illustrated in this 1924 poem written by Langston Hughes, right? It's pride, right? Racial pride, right? I too am America, right? They'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. And this poem is an example of the cultural movement known as, right, the Harlem Renaissance. So these are the things, right? You have people moving from the South, settling in the North, settling specifically in Harlem. Not only Harlem, as you could look at the map, you could see the different major cities that were settled. And there's this beautiful renaissance of, um, you know, expression of culture and freedom. And, you know, so here we go. Now look at question 15 and 16. And, you know, this question really comes up because now you have World War One coming towards its end, and people are seeking to leave I'm going to move this over. People are seeking to leave Europe, right? There was a world war, and like most places, if there's a conflict, people tend to flee conflict. And so you could see in the big funnel here, it's like Europe, people are trying to get out of Europe. And as they try to get out of Europe, they want to relocate. And the place that they want to go to is America. Except at this time, America is instituting what's known as a quota. They're limiting how many people can come into the country, right? And so back then we called this idea nativism. And nativism, some people will say it's just another name for racism. But if you wanted to look at the like literal definition, this is the literal definition here. Okay. And the reason is that, every time a group of immigrants comes to the United States, and they get settled, they do kind of resist the next group of immigrants coming over. So, originally when you had the British immigrants and the German immigrants come over to the United States and they settled and they started to feel comfortable, they now had to contend with, you know, um, Irish immigrants coming over, and they didn't really like that too much, right? Because of the Irish potato famine. So they were like, why are these people coming here? And there was like a pushback of, no, these people are going to take our jobs. They're going to make things difficult for us. And then eventually you get, you know, the Italians coming over, and now you have, the Irish saying the same thing. No, these people shouldn't be coming over, right? So it's kind of like one immigrant group always turns and faces the other immigrant group and is resistant towards them coming in because it's perceived as competition. It's perceived as, oh my gosh, these people are going to take my job. um, but we know, like looking back, that's not necessarily what happens. So but this is the feeling. This is the feeling, and this has happened, right? This has happened before. We've seen it on the West Coast over here when you had Asian immigrants coming over from China and from Japan, right? You had what was called the Gentleman's Agreement to limit Japanese immigration. You had the Chinese Exclusion Act, which was trying to get rid of Chinese immigrants. So the, these types of exclusionary policies or nativism um, come up and they're repeated over and over again, right? I mean, we kind of have some nativism going on right now, where we're resistant at this idea that we have all these new immigrants coming into the United States. Um, and there's a fear of it, right? So people are going to demand solutions, and one of the solutions that they came up with, right, which policy is most directly related to the point of view expressed in this cartoon, it was that quotas should be established for immigration, right? In other words, numbers, right? Limit how many, right? A quota is a limit placed on a target number. So how many people you're going to allow through the gates, right? And you see over here Uncle Sam, right? Remember Uncle Sam, US, right? Uncle Sam, right, stands for the United States. So Uncle Sam is there, and he is limiting the amount of people to 3%, right? That's what he's saying here, 3%. Okay. Um, let's take that off. Right? The policy represented by this cartoon was a response to the growing number of immigrants arriving from Southern and Eastern Europe, right? And you could figure that out because, again, if you look over here, you see it says Europe. Remember, whenever you're reading a political cartoon, look at all of the words. See anything that you can read, make sure you're taking note of it. Don't just pay attention to the picture, because the picture is meant to go in concert with the words that are there, right? Also, if you see a symbol, right, like a common symbol, like the old man with the stars on the hat or stars on the pants, hey, that's Uncle Sam, right? That's the United States. So this one, they kind of, they have USA written right at the bottom, so it's hard to like miss it. But um, this is what it looks like. Okay. So I hope this was helpful. I know it went a little bit long, but I'll see you in the next one, where we'll do questions 17 to 22. All right. Let me stop this here.